I've been meaning to watch
I'll
this.
start this one with some comments, a call out, let's say. I wish I didn't have to do this, but I feel like it's necessary. I've made a lot of videos on the topic of feminism, and I've noticed something quite interesting. When I critique certain branches of feminism, like liberal feminism, girl boss feminism, white feminism, I tend to get a lot of views from men. My last video titled The White Feminism of Western Media wasn't initially titled like this. I felt like white feminism was a bit clickbaity and not fully coherent with the topic of the video. But eventually I changed the title, and as soon as I did, the views started to go up, and the data shows that it's mostly been watched by men more than my other videos. This is not the first time I noticed this. Every time I make a critique of certain branches of feminism, I get more male viewers, I get a lot of new male subscribers, I get more interviews by
This person called you misogynistic in one of her videos? Okay.
men, and I'm invited by more male-run podcasts. At first I was excited, like great, I get to talk to people who aren't necessarily exposed to those feminist ideas. But over time it started to really bother me, because I felt like my criticism of certain branches of feminism was interpreted by some men, not all men, as a way to be misogynistic in an acceptable way, in an intellectual way. For example, I've received emails and DMs from men who completely misread my intentions in those critical videos, or cherry-pick the information that suits their narrative. Some even used my critics to justify bad behavior, dismissing accusations of SV as white feminism or liberal feminism. So I went back to my videos in search of the things that I said that led these people to think this way, and I just couldn't find anything. In fact, I always concluded my videos by directing people to the forms of feminism which I think are beneficial for society. Anti-carceral feminism.
She did not call you misogynistic, that chatter was lying?
Anti-imperialist feminism, socialist feminism. Now this whole thing won't stop me from criticizing liberal feminism, girl boss feminism, but now I'm much more careful with the words that I use, how I write my script.
SV is sexual violence, I think.
Now, on the other hand, a few months ago, I released a video titled The Problem with Hollywood Baby Girls, where I argued that while sexism is systemic, a structural issue, these structures aren't separate from individuals. We're not just puppets of those systems, we still have a little bit of agency, so individual behavior matters. I was honestly a bit nervous to release that video. I was worried about how men were going to react to it, and my nervousness was actually quite valid. I got a lot of messages from men telling me that it was pointless to focus on individuals, that doing so pushes men to the right, to the far right, and that basically I was just radicalizing young men. Reading those comments was deeply upsetting. First, they implied that I shouldn't call out men who act in sexist ways, and second, they treated men as if they were too fragile to handle criticism. The infantilization felt so absurd. It's not just disrespectful for me, it's disrespectful for men in general. The men I know, of all ages and political leanings, can handle criticism. These comments revealed the commenters' inability to handle that sort of criticism more than anything. Instead of leaning into the discomfort and maybe use it as an opportunity to grow, to change, they decided to turn it back on me, accusing me of radicalizing young men, which is a bold claim if you know a little bit what I do, both online and in real life. I wish these things did not affect me, but they do, so that's why I wanted to make those comments before starting the video, which is a video about men, about masculinity. So in today's video, I want to look at two trends that I've noticed recently. On the one hand, you have the male performative feminist. He may or may not have a mullet, a mustache. He may or may not have read All About Love by Bell Hooks or Joan Didion. He may or may not sip matcha on the regular. And on the other hand, we have the hyper-masculine feminist, a guy who looks very masculine but is praised for his progressivism, including his defense of women's rights. My examples for this second category are Hasan Piker and Travis Kelce. And the reason why I'm choosing them is because they've recently been featured in magazines and articles and portrayed as positive masculine role models. Now, I want to be clear, I don't know any of the individuals I'm going to talk about personally. It's not about them as individuals, it's about their public image, the way they are perceived in the media and the impact it has on culture, society, etc. In other words, I want to look at what's been happening in the media since the rise of the manosphere, the desperation to find positive male role models, and the limits of that project. I'm Alice. Well,
I think it's funny because, like, I'm not like a major how do I describe it? Like, I'm not like over the top woke or anything like that. I'm just a guy who tries to tell people not to be a fucking asshole. That's it. That's it. And I would say so is Travis Kelce to a certain degree. That's how low the goddamn bar is, bro. It's crazy.
welcome or welcome back to my channel. So I'll make a separate video on how the manosphere has evolved into a new version of itself after the Andrew Tate fall and stuff. But in this one, I want to focus on the response from the progressive side of the political spectrum. Since the rise of the manosphere, the sneakers, the Andrew Tates, the Myron Gaines, there was a general consensus that these guys weren't great. And after enough raising awareness, those people actually lost some of their popularity. That doesn't mean they didn't have an impact on society. I mean, the amount of work it took girlfriends, wives, and teachers to reverse or counter the effect these guys had on their boyfriends, their husbands, or boys in general was, and still is, insane. You must have seen the videos of the performative male feminist contests in Seattle and other cities. The typical performer has a tote bag, bell hooks or Joan Didion in one hand, a little notebook in the other. It's a whole aesthetic. I guess at this point the performative male feminist has been properly called out. No one is taking them seriously anymore. Everyone has been warned. But yeah, this is not too surprising. The male feminist was mostly an aesthetic popularized by culture magazines. It had no depth, no real feminism, just vibes. But for a while, it fulfilled culture's need for an alternative masculine role model post-Me Too and in response to the manosphere. Now, since the US elections and the Democrats lost, more and more people are saying that the left needs its own Joe Rogan.
All right, we're rolling.
So a progressive masculine role model, a progressive mind in a MAGA body, so to speak. Who's that person they're referring to? Well, he's Twitch streamer Hasan Piker, better known online as HasanAbi. Piker is a political commentator and Twitch streamer. He first made a name for himself at the Young Turks, and today he's one of the biggest streamers on Twitch, mixing leftist political commentary with gaming, news reaction, and chatting with his community. Lately, Piker has been on a lot of magazine covers and interviewed by mainstream liberal media. Discussions about masculinity and the manosphere often come up in these features. He's positioned as a potential solution to the so-called crisis of masculinity.
Greatest rule of thumb, of course, is that if you have to call yourself masculine or alpha, then you probably do not exhibit those qualities.
As a progressive guy who supports women's rights but also appeals to men. Now that's the big shift here, the big cultural shift. Between the Harry Styles, Timothée Chalamet time to now, the media has fully embraced the crisis of masculinity discourse. Now I've said it before and I'll say it again, for me this is all like nonsense, BS, unnecessary. The idea that men have had to completely change their approach of how to be men, especially post-Me Too, because that's kind of how it's framed, doesn't make any sense. It's weird, you know? We've known for a very long time that SV is bad and that you should not do it. Me Too did not break the news. And also, this idea that the reason why men are suffering, that they are lonely, depressed and stuff like that is because of their masculinity and their struggle to embrace or define who they want to be as men, completely neglects the fact that there are so many things in society at the moment, so many social, economic factors that is making the lives of people, regardless of their gender, pretty bad, pretty shitty. All those problems I've mentioned can be reconnected to capitalism, our economic system. Yet mainstream media and those liberal researchers prefer a gendered lens, so an identity-based lens, because focusing on identity means that we don't have to care about like the bigger stuff. We don't have to talk about our whole economic system. We can just fix individuals here and there, fix their masculinity problems. It's for the exact same reason that mainstream media has recently turned to Hasan Piker in search of that, you know, leftist Joe Rogan, of that progressive mind in the magazine.
It's like, this is what they bill me as, but I always say that this, like, this is seen as like, I mean, it's like a marketable term. Just like back in the day in the BuzzFeed era, they call me woke bae, right? It's just a marketable term. It doesn't define who I am. Not only does it not define who I am, but also it's missing a major point. Like, it's the media's inability to see this issue that like the crisis of masculinity, in air quotes, is not going to be solved by people like myself. It's not. Just like the Democratic Party's problems are not going to be solved by like having more liberal guys who are defending the Democrats. They need to fix these issues. They need to actually advocate for policies that help people, that improve people's lives.
body. But as someone who's been keeping an eye on what Hasan Piker has been doing for years now, I've seen him getting more and more popularity, and for me that's not necessarily due to the fact that he's a leftist gym bro. It has a lot to do with the message. Most young people in the US resonate with socialism and oppose the genocide in Palestine. Hasan Piker is one of the few people with a platform to actually speak about those things. You know, people are looking for individuals and platforms that will welcome their frustrations, validate them, politicize them. It's important that the left has big media figures speaking about Palestine, because a lot of problematic streamers like Sneeko or Andrew Tate, to some degree, are seeking a rebranding through Palestine advocacy. They want to be recipients of those frustrations too. So it's not just about the way the person looks. The values and convictions are key. Another example of this exists. Take Mehdi Hasan, for example. He's become so popular lately, and he's not a gym bro either. Or maybe he is, I don't know. His fast-growing platform reflects frustrations with media bias on Palestine and broader vibes politics. Zoran Mondani is yet another example. I mean, if you look at his profile, he's not really a Joe Rogan, but he's on track to become New York's next mayor in November. The main reason why he's so popular is because...
Okay, I think it's all because I just realized Americans didn't need a leftist Joe Rogan. They needed the Ummah. I'm just saying, all of the figures that she's pointing to, Muslim. Kind of feels like Muslims are on the come up a little bit. Islam getting a lot of positive coverage. I'm just noticing, dude. May Allah awaken the people to the evil doings of Israel and the United States of America. Things changed when Donald Trump said that.
The manosphere with its toxic role models set off a panic about men, and the media rushed to fill the gap with healthy masculinity alternatives. Gym bro leftists, soft boys, football boyfriends, whatever template could work. But the harder they try to package masculinity in a palatable, progressive way, the more absurd it becomes. It keeps feeding into the same crisis of masculine narrative that was never really about masculinity to begin with. And the danger is that this framing is making more and more people tune out of feminism altogether, seeing it reduced to vibes, to aesthetics, to role model shopping, instead of what it really is, a political movement to transform the structures that create inequality in the first place. That's the shame of it, because feminism isn't about crafting the perfect man. It's about building a society where everyone can live, work, and love free of domination.
Like, what's the actual full-blown point here? That it's just like the media is trying to fill this gap with like healthy, positive versions of like masculine men, but ultimately that's gonna fail. Is that what it is? Yeah, I mean, I agree. Everything loops back to a performance, because that's all liberalism requires. And I think one of the, at least from my perspective, this is something that I've personally experienced that she kind of nailed in the piece itself, where she talks about how like Hasan's value doesn't come from the way he looks or because he's a leftist gym bro. As someone who's watched him and his career grow over the course of many years, is because he's a socialist, because he's like, his advocacy is what makes people tune in. And I think that the way that the liberal press operates, you have to focus just on the optics. Like, it has to just be a performance. And if you do the right kind of performance, then you can convince enough people to also engage in that style of performance. Because like, I try to explain to people when they say like, oh, is this like, are you aware of the way that you are perceived? What I always say to those people is like, I'm not like working out or playing basketball or playing video games because like, I think this will get me a lot of attention from these different groups. This is not like a deliberate, cold, calculated attempt to come across as more appealing. I just happen to be this person. And if anything, throughout my career, there have been plenty of people who have actually shied away from entertaining my commentary because of those things, because of the way I look, because of the way I carry myself, because of the way I present myself. There are a lot of people, especially on the progressive side, that look to someone like myself and go, oh, that's a reactionary person. That's a bro. That's a misogynist. That's a this, that's a that. And just completely tune out. No, the issue she has is that it makes no sense to name these issues that exist. Like, it has to do with masculinity, which makes sense. Wanting to have a woman wash your underwear and cook for you could be criticized around of maturity and not manliness. I mean, that also does make sense. Yeah. A lot of these people are not growing up. They're just not growing up. They're just staying children. And that is one of the most nefarious elements of like reactionary propaganda, is that it offers a security blanket to a lot of insecure people. You find yourself in the comforts of assuming that everything that you took for granted in your social conditioning is actually correct, and none of the reasons as to why you feel like you have not gotten what society told you were supposed to get, what you were entitled to get, is a byproduct of external factors or systemic issues, not capitalism, mind you, but systemic factors such as feminist agendas.